You know, most of us only think about our own mortality in, well, in abstract ways, right? A car cuts you off in traffic, maybe a scary movie. But what does it actually feel like when you have enough time, seconds, even minutes, to fully understand that you might not survive what's happening? Today we're exploring one person's story of facing that reality not once, but twice, and the trauma that sticks around long after.
It really is the ultimate question, isn't it? Is it just some sudden shock, or is it found in those slow-motion moments where you have nothing but time to think about the end? This whole story is really built around that terrifying idea.
And that's our narrator. This one quote really sets the stage for two unbelievably intense experiences that taught him a lesson most of us, thankfully, never have to learn. And as he put it, he was good with this happening once. He really didn't need the second incident, which was, in his own words, objectively a far more precarious situation. All right, let's get into the first one.
So this first event happens while he's in the Army. And the most important detail here is his role. He was just a passenger. He was sitting in the back of a Black Hawk helicopter without a headset on. That means he had zero control over his own fate, and he couldn't even talk to the crew to figure out what was going on.
Just try to imagine this for a second. You're in a Black Hawk, flying way out over the open ocean. And then you just know something's gone wrong. You can see the pilots up front are animated, you can feel the helicopter acting strange, but you can't hear a single word they're saying. You are totally and completely isolated, a prisoner to whatever chaos is unfolding.
Okay, so here's the sequence of events. First, this loud, unnatural whining noise starts up. Then, a massive pop that he could feel right through the airframe. That was the number 2 engine failing. Now, thankfully, a Black Hawk has 2 engines, so the other one kept them flying. But still, you do not want to be that far out over the water with just one engine, limping your way back to land.
And in that time, his mind just raced to the absolute worst-case scenario. See, he'd been through this torturous underwater escape training called Dunker training, but his friends on board hadn't. He was imagining the chopper hitting the water, rolling upside down, which they tend to do, and then having to wait for the cabin to fill completely with water before even trying to escape, all while knowing his friends had no training and no emergency air supply. This wasn't just a quick scare. This was minutes of him contemplating a truly horrific end for everyone.
So, after they managed to land safely, he got to find out what happened. The engine's high-speed output shaft, basically this titanium pipe spinning at a mind-boggling 24,000 RPMs, had essentially just exploded. It blew up the flex pack, which then just disintegrated and sprayed the entire engine deck with metal shrapnel. The forces at play were just immense.
He said when he opened up the engine cowling, he was met with a scene of just absolute destruction. Twisted metal, shrapnel everywhere. His first feeling was actually relief that he hadn't accidentally left a tool in there during a recent inspection. But his second feeling was that chilling realization of just how violently this machine had torn itself apart while they were in the air.
But that was just the warm-up act. As terrifying as that was, this second incident was, as he said, objectively a far more precarious situation. And this time he wasn't a helpless passenger. He was the pilot in command.
And this is what makes these two stories so different. The first incident was a random mechanical failure where he was just along for the ride. This second one, this was caused by a catastrophic human error. And his survival and the survival of the guy next to him depended entirely on his own skill and his split-second decisions. The stakes were completely different.
So he's on a demo flight with a young CFI candidate. They're climbing out from the airport just 1,300 feet above the ground when the kid in the other seat casually asks, "So, how does it stall?" And at the exact same time, with no warning, he yanks the control stick all the way back to the stop. With the engine at full power, the plane pitched violently straight up. The left wing stalled before the right, and it threw them into one of the tightest, fastest spins he'd ever seen.
Now, what he did put them in is called an accelerated spin. This isn't some gentle practice maneuver. It is a violent, disorienting departure from controlled flight. And here's the kicker. This particular aircraft was not certified by the FAA to be spun. Our narrator had never spun this plane before and had no idea how it would react, or if it was even possible to recover. He looked out the front windscreen, and all he saw was the ground, rushing up at them, spinning to the left at about 3 to 4 rotations per second. They were pointed straight down in an aircraft that shouldn't be spinning in a situation that was by all accounts completely unsurvivable.
What happened next was just this desperate, high-stakes battle against physics. He had to save them, but he had to do it without literally tearing the plane apart. It was a deadly game of don't hit the ground, but also don't rip the wings off either.
He immediately took control, stick neutral, throttle to idle. With the ground spinning wildly up at them, he followed standard procedure, apply full rudder opposite the direction of the spin. So he stomped on the right rudder. But the plane reacted so aggressively that it abruptly stopped spinning to the left and immediately snapped into a spin at the same rate to the right.
And this is just incredible. It shows the kind of clarity you can find in pure terror. While plummeting towards the Earth, he literally thought to himself, mental note to self, half rudder next time. So that's what he did. He applied half left rudder, and after a quarter of a second that must have felt like an eternity, the spin finally stopped.
But they were now in a vertical dive, pointed straight at the ground. An inexperienced pilot might panic and just yank the stick back, but that would cause such immense G-forces that the wings would just snap off. He said you'd hear a loud pop and then watch the wings fold up over the cockpit. So instead, he just gently pulled back on the stick, executing what he estimated to be a 2G pullout. When the aircraft finally leveled out, he glanced over at the altimeter. It read 700 feet.
And just to put that into perspective for you, the normal altitude for planes flying around an airport, the traffic pattern, is 1,000 feet. He recovered 300 feet below that. You are never supposed to be at that altitude unless you are actively taking off or landing. The margin for survival was razor thin.
They landed safely, but surviving something like that is never the end of the story. The psychological trauma, the aftermath, that can last a lifetime.
He turned the aircraft around, called the tower, and told them they were coming back. He didn't say a single word to the kid the entire way. He was in shock. And he later said this, that the only thing stopping him from physically strangling the person who almost killed them both was the fact that his own body was completely numb and shaking from the adrenaline.
That day was the last time he ever flew in that aircraft for that project. He'd completely lost trust in it. He said that after that incident, every time he tried to do even a gentle, harmless practice stall, the plane tried to enter a spin. It just wasn't safe. That day marked the beginning of the end for him at that company. And, more profoundly, it led to a 12-year break from flying altogether.
And this really is the key takeaway. He reflects that the experience likely gave him a form of PTSD, which completely killed his interest in flying for over a decade. It wasn't just a close call or a bad day. It was a deeply traumatic event that reshaped his career, his passion, and his fundamental sense of safety.
And that kind of leaves us with this final thought. When you've been pushed right to the absolute edge, and you've had time to really contemplate the fall, the psychological scars can run deeper than anything else. It makes you wonder, what is the real cost of survival?